Marcus Chen stared at the security footage for the seventh time that week, his coffee growing cold as the timestamp read 22:47. And there she was again, the Vakrian woman moving through the lower habitat corridors with that peculiar grace her species possessed, stopping at each sealed chamber, pressing her clawed hand against the doors in what the AI had flagged as ritualistic, predatory behavior. He'd been station security chief for 3 years on Outpost Kepler 7, seen plenty of strange alien customs, but something about this made his instincts scream danger. Or maybe it was something else entirely that made him unable to look away. The Vakrians were apex predators from a death world, their reputation carved in the blood of a dozen conflicts before the treaty. And Thera, he'd learned her name from the manifest, was the only one stationed here, supposedly a wildlife conservation specialist. Though what that meant on a research outpost studying exoplanet, he couldn't fathom. Her file was clean, almost too clean, and that bothered him more than any red flag. Why does she do it every night? He muttered, zooming in on her face, catching that moment where her luminescent silver eyes seemed to soften, her pointed ears tilting forward as if listening to something through the reinforced doors. The computer chimed, pattern recognition alert, subject maintains precise timing. Same route, same gesture at locations 12A through 12G. Duration increasing by 0.3 seconds nightly. That was new information. And deeply unsettling. He rubbed his temples, glancing at the second monitor showing tonight's live feed. 20:43. She'd appear in for minutes if the pattern held. Marcus should report this to command. Should probably confront her with backup. Should definitely stop thinking about how her human-like features contradicted everything he'd been taught about Vakrians being ruthless and cold, the way her platinum hair caught the corridor lights. How she wore that fitted tactical jacket over a simple gray shirt, like she was trying to blend in, be less threatening. Though her athletic build suggested she could tear through the station's blast doors if she wanted. This is stupid, he told himself, pulling up the habitat manifest for the lower levels. Chambers 12A through 12G were listed as Restricted Conservation Project Alpha, authorized personnel, one name, Thera Vakrian. Whatever she was doing, she had clearance. So why did it feel wrong? The AI didn't flag authorized activity, unless the behavior matched threat databases. Computer, specify why this is flagged as ritualistic predatory behavior. The response came instantly. Gesture pattern matches Vakrian war clan marking rituals with 92% accuracy. Typically performed before coordinated attacks or territorial challenges. Marcus felt his blood run cold. 22:47 arrived like clockwork, and there she was on the monitor. Emerging from the lift with something in her hands he hadn't noticed before, a datapad, though she barely glanced at it. She moved to chamber 12A, and Marcus leaned forward, watching as she placed her palm against the door. Fingers splayed, and held it there for exactly 5 seconds. Her expression doing something that the camera almost couldn't catch, softening, warming, the fierce predator, becoming something else entirely. She moved to 12B, repeated the gesture, and Marcus noticed her lips moving. Computer, audio pickup for corridor 12, static. Then her voice, barely a whisper, melodic in a way that surprised him. Sleep well, little one. I'm still here. His heart did something complicated in his chest. This wasn't a war ritual. What was this? She continued down the line, 12C, 12D. Each time that same gentle palm press, those same whispered words. And at 12E she paused longer, her other hand coming up to touch the door. Her forehead resting against the metal for a moment that felt intensely private, like he was intruding by watching. What are you hiding? He wondered. But the tone of his own thoughts had shifted from suspicion to something uncomfortably close to fascination. He made a decision that would either end his career or answer the burning question that had consumed his week. Marcus grabbed his security tablet, checked that his sidearm was charged, though he doubted he'd need it, wanted to believe he wouldn't need it, and headed for the lower levels. The station was quiet during Gamma shift, most personnel asleep or focused on their research. The hum of life support and distant stellar winds against the shields, creating that peculiar isolation of space stations everywhere. He reached corridor 12 just as Thera finished at 12G, turning to head back, and she froze when she saw him. Those silver eyes going wide, then narrowing, her posture shifting into something defensive but not aggressive, like she was protecting something rather than preparing to attack. Officer Chen, she said, and he was struck by how she pronounced his name perfectly, no trace of the guttural Vakrian accent he'd expected. I wondered when you'd stop watching and start asking. She'd known. Of course she'd known. He felt heat creep up his neck, tried to summon his professional authority. The AI flagged your nightly activities as suspicious. I need to know what you're doing in these chambers. Her expression flickered through several emotions too quick to name, before settling on something like resignation mixed with hope. A combination that didn't make sense until she said, "Would you like to see?" "I can't. It's easier to show you than explain. And maybe it's time someone else knew." The invitation caught him off guard, as did the vulnerability in her voice. This woman, this predator, looking at him like she was tired of carrying a secret alone. "Yes," he heard himself say, and she nodded, pulling a keycard from her jacket pocket, moving to chamber 12A. "This is going to seem strange," she warned, her hand hovering over the access panel. "Your species and mine, we don't have the best history. And when I requested this assignment, they almost rejected it because of what I am. What we're supposed to be." She pressed the panel, the door sliding open with a hiss, and Marcus stepped forward, looking into the dimly lit chamber, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. A habitat, carefully constructed with heat lamps and soft bedding, climbing structures and water features. And in the center, curled in a nest of blankets, was a cub, not Vakrian, but Kresh, one of the species the Vakrians had nearly driven to extinction during the expansion wars. The cub was tiny, maybe the size of a house cat, its downy fur a soft blue-gray, and as the light from the corridor spilled in, it lifted its head, made a small chirping sound, and Marcus watched in stunned silence as its eyes found Thera, its whole body starting to vibrate with what could only be joy. "This is Kiva," Thera said softly, crouching down, and the cub scrambled over to her, climbing up her extended arm to perch on her shoulder, nuzzling against her neck with those same chirping sounds. She was orphaned when her colony's ship suffered a catastrophic failure 6 months ago. Only 3 survived. Marcus felt like reality had tilted sideways. 3? His voice came out rough. "There are 7 chambers." Thera stood slowly, Kiva clinging to her, and looked at him with eyes that held depths of sorrow and fierce determination. "The other 4 are different species. Brellian twins whose parents were killed in a mining accident. A heaven infant abandoned at a trading post. An Ixian who hatched alone when their family's stasis pods failed." She moved back into the corridor, gently returning Kiva to her chamber, that same palm press against the door, once the cub was settled. And Marcus understood with sudden clarity the cubs were responding to her touch, had been waiting for it, that nightly ritual, their anchor in a universe that had taken everything else. "Why you?" he asked, needing to understand. Why would a Vakrian dedicate herself to raising the children of other species? She turned to face him fully, and in the dim corridor lighting, she looked both ancient and achingly young, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with her human-like features and everything to do with the soul behind them. "Because my people took enough," she said simply. "Because someone recorded our war clan rituals and turned them into databases of violence. But no one recorded what we did after, how we mourn, how we atone. How some of us refuse to let the killing define us." She walked to chamber 12B, opened it to show him the Brellian twins, small reptilian creatures that uncurled from their shared heat rock to blink at her with adoring eyes. "I was a soldier, Officer Chen. I did things I can't undo, hurt species I can't bring back. But I can do this. I can make sure these 7 don't grow up alone, don't become statistics of a universe that's too often cruel." She closed that chamber, moved to 12C, and Marcus followed, watching as she showed him each one, telling him their names: Pip and Pop, the twins; Gora, the Heaven; Nyx, the Ixian, and with each introduction, he felt his understanding of her, of this situation, transform completely. "The Goodnight taps," he said, as they reached 12F. "They wait for it." Thera smiled, and it was like watching a sunrise. "They know I'm here, that they're safe, that someone will come back." Her voice caught slightly. "It's the smallest thing, but for them, it's everything." Marcus found himself at a crossroads between protocol and something more profound. The security officer in him noting that this entire operation skirted dozens of regulations about unauthorized life forms and undocumented conservation projects. But the human in him, the part that had grown up on stories of Earth's extinct species, And the ache of irreversible loss, that part understood exactly what she was doing and why it mattered, more than rules written by committees that had never held an orphan cub. This is completely against station regulations, he said, watching her shoulders tense, preparing for the confrontation, the end of everything she'd built. Which is why we're going to need to file proper paperwork, establish Conservation Project Alpha as an official station operation, and get you the resources you actually need instead of whatever you've been scraping together on your own. Her head snapped toward him, silver eyes wide with shock. What? He pulled out his tablet, already drafting the proposal. You need better climate controls in 12E. The heaven habitat is 10 degrees too cold for optimal development. The Brilliant twins require a more varied diet than standard rations can provide. And Kiva needs socialization opportunities or she'll develop attachment issues. He looked up from the screen, caught her staring at him like he'd just spoken an alien language. I grew up on Earth, spent summers at my grandmother's wildlife sanctuary. I know what proper conservation looks like, and this, he gestured at the chambers. This is someone doing their best with nothing, when you should have everything. Why would you help me? Thera asked, and there was something raw in the question, like she'd forgotten that help could come without conditions. Marcus considered his answer, knew it mattered, that this moment was balanced on the edge of something significant. Because you called them little ones, he said finally. Because you rest your forehead against their doors like it hurts to leave them. Because the AI flagged you as dangerous, and you're probably the most dangerous being on this station. But you use that strength to be gentle with creatures that can't fight back. He saved the draft, met her eyes. Because everyone talks about the Vakrian war machine, but no one talks about Vakrians like you. And maybe they should. The silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of the station and something electric that made his pulse quicken. I have to feed them, she said quietly. It takes about 2 hours. You're welcome to stay, if you want. Learn what they need for your report. It wasn't just an invitation to observe, and they both knew it. I'd like that, Marcus replied, and her smile this time held relief and something warmer. A connection forming in the space between duty and choice. The next 2 hours rewrote everything Marcus thought he knew about Vakrians and himself. He watched Thera bottle feed Gora, the heaven infant's tiny hands clutching her fingers while it drank, her voice a constant stream of soft reassurance. He helped her prepare the specialized food paste for Nyx, the Ixian, learning that the species communicated through bioluminescent patterns and that Thera had taught herself their language. Her translator pad covered in handwritten notes and sketches. The Brilliant twins, Pip and Pop, performed an elaborate dance for treats. And Thera laughed, actually laughed, the sound like music when they tried to outperform each other. Climbing over Marcus's shoulders to reach the dried fruit, he held. They like you, she observed, and he felt absurdly pleased by that assessment. They have good taste, he replied, without thinking, then felt heat crawl up his neck when he realized how that sounded, but Thera just ducked her head, platinum hair falling forward to hide what might have been a blush, if Vakrians could blush. Kiva was last, the crushed cub, the most demanding, requiring not just food but play, and Thera moved with her through an elaborate routine involving a feathered toy and a laser pointer. The cub's chirps filling the chamber with joy that felt like defiance against every tragedy that had brought her here. She sleeps the worst, Thera admitted, as they settled Kiva back into her nest. The cub fighting exhaustion with the determination of the very young. Nightmares, I think, about the ship, about being alone in the dark. She stroked the cub's head with one clawed finger, infinitely gentle. The taps help. All of them. They sleep better knowing I'll come back. That the darkness isn't permanent. Marcus watched Kiva's eyes finally close, her breathing evening out, and felt something in his chest expand uncomfortably. You're giving them what you needed, he said, the realization emerging as he spoke it. After the war, after everything, someone to come back, to prove that not all Vakrians were destroyers. Thera's hand stilled, and when she looked at him, her eyes held unshed tears that she blinked away with fierce pride. Is it that obvious? He shook his head. Only to someone paying attention. They left Kiva's chamber quietly, and Thera performed her ritual, the palm press, the whispered words with Marcus standing witness, understanding now that this wasn't just for the cubs, but for her too. A promise renewed each night that she could be more than her past. In the corridor, with all 7 chambers sealed and their occupants sleeping, Thera finally showed the exhaustion she'd been hiding, leaning against the wall with a sigh that seemed to come from her bones. Thank you, she said, for not reporting this as a threat. For understanding, for she gestured vaguely. For seeing them as worth saving, Marcus moved closer, not crowding but present, aware of her in ways that had nothing to do with security protocols. Thank you for trusting me enough to show me, he countered. How long were you planning to do this alone? She laughed, bitter and tired. As long as it took. Until they were grown, rehabilitated, ready to return to their people or make their own way. Years, he realized. She was signing up for years of secret sacrifice, of being suspected and isolated, because no one else would do it. Not anymore, he said firmly. We'll make this official, get you proper support, maybe even find other volunteers to help with the load. Hope flickered across her face, fragile and beautiful. Why are you doing this really? She asked. You could have reported me, got an accommodation. Then the officer who caught the suspicious Vakrian in illegal activity. He smiled, feeling the truth of his answer in every word. Because I'm tired of easy choices that lead to hard regrets. And I think you're exactly what the galaxy needs more of, someone who fights for life instead of death. The silence that followed held weight. The kind that comes before important words or significant actions. And Marcus was acutely aware of how close they stood. How her eyes reflected the corridor lights like stars. How his heart was doing complicated things that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with connection. Marcus, she said, his first name sounding like a discovery in her mouth. Would you come back? Tomorrow night, not as security chief, but as she hesitated, vulnerable in a way that made her seem more courageous, not less, as someone who might want to be part of this. It was an invitation to something beyond the CUBS, beyond duty, and they both felt it humming in the air between them. I'm already part of it, he replied softly. From the moment you let me see Kiva, I was part of it, part of what you're building here. He pulled out his tablet, pulled up the schedule he'd already been mentally composing. I'll submit the conservation project proposal tomorrow, priority flagged. In the meantime, I'll adjust the security AI to recognize your nightly routine as authorized welfare checks, not threat behavior. He looked up, found her watching him with an expression that made breathing difficult. And yes, I'll come back tomorrow night. And the night after that, for as long as you'll have me. Thera reached out slowly, giving him every opportunity to step back, and pressed her palm against his chest, over his heart. The same gesture she used with the chamber doors. And Marcus understood he was being included in that circle of protection and promise. That she was letting him into the most guarded parts of herself. In Vakrian culture, she said quietly, this gesture means I acknowledge you, I see you, I trust you to return. Her hand was warm through his uniform, clawed fingers, gentle against the fabric. The CUBS wait for the tap because it means they matter to someone. I'm telling you that you matter to me, that this, she gestured between them, matters to me. His hand came up to cover hers, human fingers over Vakrian claws. Two species with bloody history writing a different story in a quiet corridor while orphaned children slept nearby. In human culture, he said, we have a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. You've been doing this alone, but you don't have to anymore. We'll build that village, you and me, for all 7 of them. Her smile was radiant, transformative, and when she stepped back, her hand sliding from beneath his, they both felt the promise hanging between them like a physical thing. 3 months later, Conservation Project Alpha was the station's pride and public relations coup, featured in news feeds across the coalition as an example of post-war healing and interspecies cooperation. Marcus stood in the redesigned habitat complex, watching Thera guide a group of volunteers through feeding routines, her voice confident and warm as she introduced them to each cub's personality and needs. The space had been transformed with proper environmental controls, species-appropriate enrichment. Even a central observation area where off-duty personnel could visit, learn, fall in love with these 7 representatives of a gentler future. Kiva had grown, her blue-gray fur thickening, though she still chirped excitedly every time she saw Thera, still demanded her goodnight tap with imperious insistence. The Brellian twins had become station mascots, their playful antics recorded and shared across the network. Gora, Nyx, and the others thrived under expanded care. But Thera remained their anchor, the one constant they'd trusted first and longest. You're staring again, came a voice beside him, and Marcus turned to find Commander Oak's station director, looking amused. Just appreciating good work, he deflected, but Oak snorted. You're appreciating her, which, frankly, who can blame you? She's remarkable, and you two have built something special here, as if summoned by their conversation. Thera finished with the volunteers and made her way over, her platinum hair pulled back in a practical braid, her fitted tactical pants and dark blue shirt covered by a vest full of feeding supplies and enrichment toys. Looking every inch the professional conservationist she'd always been, beneath the suspicion and secrecy. Commander Officer Chen, she greeted them formally, but her eyes on Marcus held warmth that was anything but professional. The new volunteers are working out well. In another month, we might actually achieve something resembling a normal schedule. Oakes nodded approvingly. Excellent. Though I hope you'll still maintain your evening routines. I understand the CUBS have come to depend on it. Thera's expression softened. Always? No matter how much help we get, they'll have their goodnight taps. Their reassurance that someone comes back. The commander excused herself, leaving Marcus and Thera in the observation area, watching through the transparent barriers as the CUBS played, ate, lived without fear. Walk with me? Thera asked, and they fell into step together. A routine they'd developed over the past months. Stolen moments between shifts and responsibilities, they ended up in the Arboretum, the station's green lung, where earth plants and alien flora mixed in careful ecosystem balance. The air thick with oxygen and the scent of growing things. I have something to tell you, Thera said as they settled on a bench beneath a willow-like tree, whose purple leaves chimed softly in the artificial breeze. She looked nervous, her fingers twisting together, and Marcus felt his heart rate spike. The Kresh delegation contacted me today. They want Kiva back, to raise her among her people, teach her their ways. It felt like a punch to the chest, though he knew this had always been the goal: rehabilitation and return. That's good, he managed. That's what we've been working toward. Thera nodded, but her eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. It is good. It's right. It's just, her voice cracked. She's been mine to protect for so long. And I know I'm not her parent, can never truly be her family. But letting her go is. She stopped, fighting for composure. And Marcus did the only thing he could think of. He took her hand, threaded his fingers through hers, human and Vakrian united in shared grief and love. It's devastating, he finished, for her. Because you gave her everything, and the reward for doing it right is having to say goodbye. They sat in silence, hands clasped, while the Arboretum's subtle lighting shifted to mimic sunset. And Marcus felt the weight of what she'd taken on. The emotional cost of caring for creatures designed to leave. The others? He said quietly. Will they all go eventually? Thera nodded. If we do this right, yes. Pip and Pop's colony has been rebuilt. They'll go home in 6 months. Gora will join a Heaven community ship. Nyx might stay longer. The Ixians are scattered, but will find their place. She looked at him, tears finally spilling over, tracking down her flawless skin. I knew this was always temporary, that success meant losing them. But I didn't expect it to hurt this much. Didn't expect to love them so fiercely that letting go feels like tearing pieces of myself away. Marcus squeezed her hand, used his other to gently wipe away her tears, his thumb careful against her cheek. That's what makes you extraordinary, he said. You love them enough to do what's best for them, even when it destroys you. You're giving them the greatest gift of future among their own people. Because of a Vakrian who refused to let history be the end of their story, she leaned into his touch, and he shifted closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders, letting her rest her head against his chest while she cried for the CUBS she'd saved and would have to release. What will you do? He asked when her tears slowed. After they're all placed, when the project reaches its conclusion. Thera was quiet for a long moment, her hand finding its way over his heart, that familiar gesture that meant trust and promise. There are always orphans, she said finally. Always victims of accidents, wars, disasters, who need someone to care whether they survive. I thought maybe if the station approves, if you. She pulled back to look at him. Silver eyes, uncertain and hopeful. I'd like to make this permanent. An ongoing conservation and rehabilitation program. Give more lost ones a chance at belonging. It was a vision of the future. One that included this station, these people, him. I think that's the best idea I've heard in years, Marcus said honestly. And for the record, I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me, whether that's as your security liaison, your volunteer, or he took a breath, jumping off the cliff of professional distance into something real and terrifying and perfect, or as whatever else you might want me to be. Understanding dawned in her eyes. followed by joy that transformed her face into something incandescent. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" she whispered. Marcus smiled, feeling more certain than he'd ever been. "I'm saying that I started watching you on security footage because you seemed dangerous. And I kept watching because you were beautiful. And I fell in love somewhere between the second and third time you whispered, 'Sleep well, little one,' to a cub who trusted you to come back." He brought her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles, over the claws that could destroy, but chose to protect. "I'm saying that you're the bravest person I've ever met. That what you do matters more than any security protocol or regulation. And that I'd like to spend the foreseeable future proving that not all humans are afraid of Vakrians, especially when that Vakrian is you." Thera's answering kiss was sweet and salt-tinged from tears, a beginning written in the language of hope and healing. Two people from species that had been enemies choosing to be something else entirely. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his, the intimate gesture of Vakrian trust and affection, and whispered, "In my language, there's a word, Krashtova. It means the one who sees me truly and stays. I think you might be my Krashtova, Marcus Chen." That night, they walked the corridor together, visiting each chamber, and Marcus participated in the ritual for the first time. His palm pressed beside hers on each door, 2 sets of goodnight taps for cubs who had doubled their family without knowing it. Kiva chirped through her door, recognizing the pattern, and Thera laughed through fresh tears, the sound joyful despite the sorrow of impending separation. "She approves of you," Thera said, and Marcus felt the significance of that approval settle into his bones. The security logs would show 2 figures in the corridor that night and every night after, performing what might look like ritual to outsiders, but was really the simplest magic: showing up, being present, proving that someone cares enough to return. The AI no longer flagged it as threatening behavior. Marcus had reprogrammed it to recognize the truth. This was protection, devotion, love in its most fundamental form. As they finished at Chamber 12G, Thera took his hand again, interlaced their fingers, and they stood in the quiet corridor while their charges slept safe and warm, orphans no longer alone, guarded by a Vakrian who'd chosen atonement, and a human who'd chosen to see beyond fear. "Thank you," Thera said softly, "for not just watching, for asking, for caring enough to understand." Marcus pulled her close, pressed his lips to her temple, breathed in the scent of her, something like ozone and starlight, alien and wonderful. "Thank you for letting me in," he replied, "for trusting me with them, with you. With this beautiful thing you've built from sorrow and hope." They stayed like that for a moment that stretched and crystallized. 2 souls finding each other in the vast darkness of space, proving that the universe, for all its cruelty, still made room for connection, for love, for the kind of courage that chooses gentleness. The cubs would grow, would leave, would carry with them the memory of a Vakrian's goodnight tap and the knowledge that they'd been worth saving. And Thera and Marcus would remain, building their village, expanding their family, writing a new story, one orphaned child at a time, one pressed palm at a time, one whispered promise at a time, that love persists, that healing is possible, that even predators can choose to protect the vulnerable, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is the fierce determination to care. The security logs would show it all, document their nightly ritual, but the words on the screen could never capture what it truly was: not a threat, not a warning, but a revolution of tenderness, witnessed in the gentle tap of a hand against a door and the patient waiting of those who'd learned that someone always comes back.